Okay. All right. So welcome to Civic Buzz. It's our public speaker and discussion series with the League of Minnesota. No, League of Women Voters Minneapolis. Um, we are an educational forum and organized by the members, open to the public, even though it's mostly members that show, which is one thing I want to encourage, is all of our members to remember to invite your friends and put on your social media and whatnot, because we are open to the public, and the more people that can learn about our democracy, the better. Sorry, my editorializing. So our goal for Civic Buzz is that everyone leaves the discussion with a broader understanding of the issues. Tonight's issue is the Minneapolis Climate Equity Plan. The League of Women Voters does have positions on both climate and diversity and equity. I'm going to read our Minnesota League DEI policy. The League is an organization fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to the organization's current and future success in engaging all individuals, households, communities, and policymakers in creating a more perfect democracy. Both the National and Minnesota League have policies on climate change. The National League says the League believes climate change is a serious threat facing our nation and our planet. The League believes an interrelated approach to combating climate change, including through energy conservation, air pollution control, building resilience, and promotion of renewable resources, is necessary to protect public health and defend the overall integrity of the global ecosystem. We support climate goals and policies that are consistent with the best available climate science and that will ensure a stable climate system for future generations. In addition to the National League's position, Minnesota has positions based on natural resource management. We believe public policy should promote resource conservation, stewardship, and long-range planning with the responsibility for managing natural resources shared by all levels of government. We promote measures to reduce pollution from mobile and stationary sources and promote development of more energy-efficient transportation systems. We support environmentally sound policies that reduce energy growth, emphasize energy conservation, and encourage the use of renewable resources. Government should promote policies that reduce the generation and promote the reuse and recycling of solid and hazardous waste, and support measures to reduce generation of solid waste and ensure safe treatment, storage, and disposal of all waste. So tonight we're going to learn about what our city government is doing about climate and climate equity. Our distinguished speaker, Kim Havey, is the Minneapolis Health Department's Director of Sustainability. He's also a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Director Havey's department will be responsible for implementing much of the climate equity plan, if I'm correct, passed by the city council. So after the presentation, there will be plenty of time for questions from the audience. And you can either put those in the chat, which my colleague Diane Venters will be monitoring, or you can use the hand raise icon at the bottom. Does everybody know how to use that? Okay, so either way, you can get your questions asked, but please leave them till after the presentation. So without further ado, Director Havey. Oh, you're on mute, Kim.
Sorry about that.
So
I'm going to try to share my screen here, and hopefully is that coming up yet?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Kim Havey, as Lisa said, Director of Sustainability at the City of Minneapolis. I'm here to talk about our new 2023 Climate Equity Plan. We're centering equity in our climate planning, and really excited to talk to you about a few aspects of the plan and open to any questions you might have as far as other aspects like sustainable building policy or things. I'm going to focus on a couple of aspects of the plan that include both our city enterprise activities and also our sort of foundation for the plan, as well as our goals around housing and weatherization and energy efficiency. So let's start off with just sort of the foundation of the plan. This plan was really based on figuring out how we really create a resilient, low carbon and equitable city. Equity and environmental justice is at its foundation with this plan. So our mission is about collaborating with people and all aspects of the that make up the city of Minneapolis on achieving our low carbon, environmentally just emissions reduction over the next 20 to 30 years. So this plan is about setting a really ambitious goal to get to carbon neutrality in an environmentally just way by 2050. And we do that also by using the city of Minneapolis's very committed enterprise and political structure to be able to set the example and get to carbon neutrality by 2040. So the interconnecting principles that support our equity plan are about health, wealth, and equity. First of all, if we have a really healthy environment, we're going to have very healthy citizens and residents. And a lot of our wealth that is generated in the city of Minneapolis actually goes to fossil fuel organizations outside of the state of Minnesota. So we have no gas production here. We have no uranium production here. We have no coal production here. We have no oil production in Minnesota. So it's a curse and a blessing. It's actually a blessing right now, because if we're able to actually generate electricity and energy locally, we're going to actually be able to keep more of our hard-earned dollars within the city and within the state. And this interconnects, of course, with climate. Interconnectedness on climate is so fundamental. This affects health, it affects prosperity, and it affects our resiliency to the climate and weather changes that we're going to be experiencing as a result of increasing temperatures. So what we have here, just going into the more technical aspects of the plan, we have an accelerated goal to achieve our net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This is based on the mayor's commitment to the C40 or Climate 40 commitment to get towards carbon neutrality as close as we can by 2040 for those cities and communities who have actually contributed the most to our emissions, as well as have currently the most wealth within their cities and their community. And Minneapolis falls within that. We have higher emissions per capita, and historically we've done that, as well as we have higher income per capita than many other cities around the world. So we're committed to really accelerating our activities to give other cities around the world that are developing an opportunity to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 on a slightly slower trajectory. Right now, our emissions, which has changed since 2017, has the highest emissions coming from fossil, known as natural gas, but we call it fossil gas. It is a fossil fuel, just like oil and coal, and we should identify it that way. We have electricity making up 28% of our emissions, on-road transportation 24%, and some other things around wastewater and solid waste, bringing up the other small major aspects of this is citywide emissions as of 2021. So really the focus of our efforts are going to be around keeping our electricity emissions reducing. They're on a very good trajectory right now, thanks to state legislation and local legislation. Minneapolis is on a trajectory to be 100% renewable electricity by 2030. The state has set an example by setting a guideline statewide. All energy will be carbon neutral by 2040. But fossil gas continues to be a pretty hard nut to crack. On-road transportation has got a lot of way to go, but really good things happening around electrification and transportation. So this is a little bit of complicated chart, but the good news is we've made really good progress on a number of different areas, except for in our areas of fossil gas and solid waste, as far as reducing our overall carbon emissions. We have reduced since 2006 the citywide carbon emissions by 30%. That's really exceptional. It's 5 years ahead of schedule. But we have got some really aggressive goals to get there in regards to getting carbon neutral by 2050 with this accelerated plan. And the really big challenge that we have, actually, the electricity is on track to be carbon neutral by 2030. We are nowhere on track to be minus 35 on fossil gas emissions. We are actually up a little bit for 2021. On-road transportation's been doing great. Could get there. I think it might. Solid waste, very challenging. It really popped up during the COVID years. People, everything being ordered in and Amazon and all that really created a real challenge on solid waste. And there continues to be a real proliferation of plastics. And wastewater, this is both the production of water and wastewater. I think we're going to be able to get there citywide. We have a commitment to go 100% renewable electricity powering our entire water purification and distribution system by 2030. So, and we're really on track to do that. Just recently, we just are moving forward on a 1 megawatt solar installation at the city's water facility. So we'll be able to basically get carbon neutral on the wastewater by 2025, 2026. Part of this process that we went through to over the last 2 years to develop our once every 10-year climate action and equity plan was to really engage intentionally organizations and people and individuals in our city who aren't normally taking part in our typical ways that we have engaged through commissions or online surveys or things like that. So we were actually very blessed to have a grant from the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance that allowed us to be able to engage and help pay for organizing in a very wide range of cultural communities, such as the Native American community, the Latina community, the Lao community, the Somali community, the youth community, elderly, Somali, and one of our I'm forgetting, Hmong community. So a lot of, and of course, North Side Black residents, and so a whole different level of sort of very specific and long-term community engagement was part of developing this process. So we had a very large outreach on stakeholders. We had a steering committee that pulled in folks from our environmental justice communities and our green zones, and also members of all these different groups that we were engaging with, as well as city officials, to really put together the principles of this plan. Some of the things that we saw or we heard is that we need to prioritize low income first. We don't want to leave anyone behind. This is a transition that's happening fast and technologically, and you can see, just like many other things, it starts off with early adopters who have the knowledge and money to be able to engage in this. So we don't want to be leaving anyone behind. This means that we need to focus on our green zones, which we've really prioritized in this. We need to look at how we combine home and apartment improvements for energy efficiency. We need to demonstrate what we're doing and how we can do that in the community and not have this be something that's just happening downtown in City Hall. We need to be able to improve the health and safety of our communities. To be sustainable, we have to have safe communities And that also means reducing our health and emergency visits, but also the safety of people to be able to take public transit, to be able to engage in that kind of thing is, can be can be difficult. I've experienced it many times myself. So that is a big issue that comes up, even though we're talking about sustainability. If you don't have a safe community, we can't talk about sustainable communities. Continue culturally specific outreach. This is really important to continue the relationships that we build through this planning process. Develop resilience hubs in communities, which we have 3 kind of pilot projects we're working on to really start addressing some of the issues around power outages and extreme heat. This is a side note. I'm going to move this out here a little bit, but the amount of power outages for electricity is 3 times as high in South Minneapolis, Phillips neighborhood as it is in Plymouth, Minnesota. So that's actually something we've just recently got data on. And then reducing air pollution from cars and buses kind of makes sense. Our environmental justice, communities of color are much more urban areas surrounded by freeways, etc. So I got a quote there from one of our participants in the conversations we had. So goals and strategies. Ultimately, what we're looking at is healthy and energy efficient homes and apartments. We have 52% of our residents now are renters. So our ability to be able to tackle the climate issues are really need to be focusing on rental apartments as well as homes. So we got to keep that in mind when we develop programs and policies. Clean indoor and outdoor air. This is a really important part of what we discovered through this planning process. It's very difficult to affect the outdoor air quality. We all know that this summer more than ever. But what we can affect is indoor air quality very dramatically. And people might remember, hey, everybody bought an indoor air purifier when COVID first hit and spent $1,000 or whatever, trying to figure out if they had, could clean up their inside. We can do that for much less money and do it in a way when we're weatherizing that provides for opportunities to improve indoor air quality at times when we have really bad outdoor air quality. So that's part of our climate plan. That's part of healthy communities. More green space and trees. Obviously, we need to be able to keep our trees alive too in these drought things. So we're working on really taking a more systematic approach to maintaining our trees. And we're excited about that. Carbon-free transportation and complete streets, meaning we have walkability, transitability, bikeability, and driving ability easily and safely without any collisions or car deaths and things. Clean water. This is really the first time we've had clean water in this, but clean water is something that the city of Minneapolis provides to the city as well as numerous suburban communities. And it's absolutely essential to be able to provide clean, consistent water to the city to be able to be a sustainable city and also be able to decarbonize that entire system. It's a very big energy user to move water around. Green business and workforce opportunities. All of this can't be done unless we're able to bring a new additional workforce and transition workforce into the support of these areas. Local food is a big area we'd like to see more of, and gardening. And I'm on the Homegrown Food Council and really enjoy the activities there about able to reduce our food waste. Food waste consists of 30% of our overall waste currently. So if we can actually figure out a way to transition food that's being thrown away to being used by people who are need it, it will have multiple benefits, including reducing carbon emissions as well as reducing our waste. Green buildings and industry. We need to figure out how we're transitioning buildings and industry. This is a big part of what the city of Minneapolis emissions are from, as basically the financial and business center of the Minnesota and really the upper Midwest. This is about 50% of our carbon emissions. So we're really going to be looking at how we reduce those emissions are going to affect their overall livability of our city. Carbon-free energy systems, working with our utilities to reduce their emissions, including really focusing on, as I said earlier, fossil gas. And then a big one, setting the example, net zero energy for the city of Minneapolis. I'm not going to go through all this because I went through kind of the big goals. These are some of our specific strategies by 2030. And one of them that I didn't mention, I want to highlight because it's extremely important to everything that we do, is that we have about 17,000 households that have paid more than 6%, sometimes 10 or 20% of their annual income for energy costs to heat and power their house. That is a significant energy burden. So our goal by 2030 is to be able to figure out a way, which through weatherization, reducing energy use, as well as looking at ways to provide more renewable energy on site or through other programs to be able to reduce energy burden for those families at over 6%. The average household in Minneapolis pays about 2.2%. So this is 3 times the level that the average household in Minneapolis pays. And that's got to be really important to our focus on everything we do, because that's where we start figuring out how the energy system, environmental, and equity really come together, and cost of energy is one of them. So what are we going to do? Net zero GHG by 2040 for city operations. This is some of our specific activities that we're going to be working on, some of which we've already been working on. Implementing a climate legacy initiative to fund local climate action. We've already initiated that, and we're going to be moving forward with that here in 2023 to start in 2024. We're looking at establishing a cabinet or sub-cabinet, as sort of the governor's office has it, around the climate equity plan that includes all the department heads across the city, and figuring out how we engage and incorporate carbon emission tracking, as well as goals and strategies around all of our departments. So really trying to figure out how we implement across all departments sustainability in this plan. We're going to leverage our sustainability policies that we passed to ensure that all of our new buildings will be net zero energy by 2030, leading by example. We want to research and develop a capital plan for all city-owned existing buildings to achieve net zero energy by 2040. Again, 10 years ahead of our overall citywide goal, to lead by example. We want to prioritize emissions from fossil gas in city-owned buildings. We've already achieved in 2023 net zero renewable for our electricity. We're going to ramp up our green cost share funding and leverage our federal and state grants that are coming out, and then improve our tree removal through private incentives and support. And we've done a really great job of getting rid of emerald ash borer trees on boulevards, but we still have a lot on private property that are going to have to be coming down. So it's going to be a pivot to really focusing on our efforts as the city to focus on private tree removal and replacement. The good news is there's a lot of good money coming out of the Biden administration that we've already applied for to help on that. And then we're also going to be continuing to support the efforts of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board on public land to add 200,000 new trees on public property by 2030. And then we're also really pushing forward on all new affordable housing, including within our Minneapolis Homes projects for passive and net zero energy new homes that are being incentivized and being built for families at 60 and even 30%, and really partnering with our public housing authority to really reduce the amount of energy use within public housing and affordable housing to keep the costs low for our families. One of the big things I'm going to talk about later, what people can do, is to figure out how we can transition from gas for many of our household uses, the main one being heating, to a more carbon-free electricity. So as you can see, we've got a really good plan to be able to reduce our overall electricity carbon emissions by 2040 to zero. But we really don't have a plan for reducing our gas emissions. And that continues to make up the majority, and will have an increasing majority of the emissions that we have. So one of the great things that we've been working with Bloomington, Eden Prairie, and Edina on is an Electrify Everything Minnesota guide. And this was launched in 2023, and was part of a kind of a cohort of cities that we were able to put together to really focus on ways that we can reduce emissions within your home, and how we can transition homes. And this is applicable to apartments as well too. So I encourage folks to be able to look at this Electrify Everything guide. It really talks about weatherization first and foremost, sealing up your home, getting proper insulation, working out ways to make your house more energy efficient, reducing your overall energy use, and then looking at ways you can transition to an electric future. So we're really looking at promoting hybrid systems that are able to basically swap out your air conditioning system for a dual heat and cooling heat pump system. It's exactly the same system, but it runs one way and then reverses and runs another way. But a heat pump that can do both heating and cooling, and not just cooling, in homes that have duct heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. So that's going to be a really big push that we're doing. And of course, there's big incentives I'll talk about in just a minute for homeowners to invest in that. Looking at ways to reduce gas in homes and be able to eliminate it basically is really something we're looking at. We have technologies and ways to do that through electric dryers, and of course changing out stoves to be induction cooking or electric. So we're really looking at a couple of different pathways. We created this guide on, which is really about wanting to accelerate the work on electrification and get to 100% carbon neutral for your home. That's the Climate Now pathway, starting with lowest cost projects, so things you can do easily to be able to sort of reduce your energy use and climate, and then focusing on indoor air quality. What are the things that are potentially affecting your indoor air quality? And there are things that do affect it. It's a proven fact that not well ventilated gas cooktops and stoves, and ovens will increases the nitric and sulfur dioxide levels to a point that trigger asthma attacks. It's something we have a staff person in the health department that works with families specifically on who have high incidences of hospitalization related to childhood asthma. So this healthy and safe homes is a way to really reduce potential incidence of hospital visits related to asthma by reducing the amount of nitric and sulfur dioxide emissions that come from stoves, ovens, clothes dryers and water heaters. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of different ways you can really do that. Really transitioning out electric cooking ranges is one. There's new technologies in electric heat pump water heaters, which also can help reduce humidity and also add heat to your basements as well, and require no ventilation. And then weatherizing and ventilating your home through actually new systems that actually monitor the amount of carbon monoxide and humidity levels and that kind of thing. They also have filters. So this is one of the ways that when we're weatherizing, we're going to actually be able to create better indoor air, is by using filtration systems that are common, of course, on our advanced HVAC systems, to be able to filter the particulate matters out of the air and create more better indoor air quality. But when you have older homes that have radiators or other kinds of things where there's not a centralized air conditioning system or heating system, this is all about the air quality is a lot different than when you're getting the forced air systems. So really working out ways that we can improve that in many of our older homes that were built before these systems were common. One of the things I want to also provide to you is that there's a great resource through the Clean Energy Resource Team's Inflation Reduction Act.org/Inflation Reduction Act.org on incentives and rebates. And so these are some of the rebates that are available to people to transition to a more electrified future and to get to be able to reduce dependence on gas. And you can see that there's an opportunity just on electric stoves and cooktops for a rebate of $840. So that's cash back, not even a tax credit, but a cash back payment. And heat pumps for heating and cooling for families at 150% of median income or less are at $8,000. So you get a maximum of $14,000 if you're in this qualification of 150% or less of median income, which is quite high in Minnesota. The median income and the Hennepin, I'm sorry, in your local area here in Hennepin County is $124,000. So depending on household size, there's variations, but it's available to and even if you're above that, there's other energy incentives, but just not quite as generous. So kind of concluding out on this, as we've completed this climate equity plan and put together some goals, and of course there's many other things outside of the housing and what we're doing specifically in our own enterprise, the city enterprise itself. We're actually introduced a climate legacy initiative, which was co-authored by Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Shugtai, and Mayor Fry, to provide $10 million annually to fight climate change and leverage state and federal funding. And the mayor's 2024 budget lays out the use of these funds, and we are hoping to get the funding starting January 1st, 2024. And we have a lot of other opportunity for state and federal funds coming in as well too. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully there was some interesting information that's helpful for you. But I'm happy to answer questions on, as I mentioned earlier, on any of the different topics you might have around sustainability locally or otherwise. Thank you.
Right, Diane, are we gonna take
Yeah, Kim,
questions
do you
from the
wanna-
chat first, or, okay?
Sure, I'm looking here. I didn't see any questions in the chat.
I have a question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have two questions. One is, so I read somewhere, heard somewhere that the burner downtown that burns our garbage, or the Minneapolis garbage, there's some people that are upset about something about that. What is that a problem, or that it's polluting, or what's the deal with that?
Okay, well, it's a complicated situation, as always with these things, but ultimately, the city of Minneapolis does not allow for its garbage to be, as a policy against putting garbage in landfills. Something Hennepin counties did many years ago, 20 years ago, then was to put together this this Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, which incinerates all the garbage in Minneapolis, except for some of the more commercial deconstruction stuff that still goes to landfills and outside of the metro area slightly. But anyway, all of our residential garbage goes into that. It's a problem. Yes, it does create emissions. It is not, as much as everyone wants to say it's clean emissions, I don't think there is clean emissions from being able to burn the amount of plastics. It is a high amount of plastics. It is a high amount of wet, as I mentioned earlier, food waste. And so it is a problem. And it also is on the border of, well, it's, it's in North Loop, so that's all happening and everything, but that does, the emissions do permeate across a very wide range of a high urban density area and a significant portion of the community, which has a high percentage of BIPOC community, but also getting emissions from multiple other sources. So it's a problem. the reality is we have to be able to reduce our waste in Minneapolis by 80%. If we're able to really do that, and move it to recycling or composting, is part of that plan, but really reducing almost the sourcing of it is what I see. We don't have a good alternative to the HERC at this point. And County would be happy to close it, I think, to a certain extent, but what do we do and what's the cost and the impact? There isn't a good alternative, but that's why we got to reduce our waste and create a more zero waste economy.
Well, there is a question in the chat about replacing gas fireplaces. Is there any alternative to that?
You know, it's a difficult question. On one hand, we don't want to have something like a gas fireplace be a reason for people to be having gas coming to their house for you know, to have a gas hookup and then therefore running other appliances and stuff. On the other hand, a gas fireplace, in the amount of time that it runs, in most cases is very insignificant. It's even you know, the use of it's the heating system that's 90% of your heating, and your air heating and your water heater, that's 90% of your gas use. The stove, oven, and gas fireplace are 10%. So I'm a little bit like, yeah, we live in Minnesota. I don't know. We don't want to have gas be the car. If we can figure out a way to be able to use a way and use our gas in a very minor way, you know, that might be okay. It's just we don't want that to be the lead in to having everything be gas appliances, and that's somehow how it goes. So
we have another question about rental properties and how do we deal with rental properties in terms of putting in insulation and forcing rental our landlords to do those kinds of things. I believe that's what that question is asking.
Yeah. Well, one, when we don't have the ability to make existing buildings more energy efficient. There was a bill that was put forward last year by Senator Larry Kraft out of St. Louis Park to create a glide path towards carbon emissions in existing buildings, which was 50% reduction by 2035. That did not pass. It didn't go through the Senate, but we don't have the policy regulatory leverage to do that. So we're really focusing on, but I would like to see that, because this is a statewide issue. It shouldn't be the city of Minneapolis having to, you know, be the enforcer of this. This is much broader than just the city. But what we can do is we're really ramping up our efforts on incentives. And so those buildings who are part of the 4D program, which is the tax classification bill number 4D, but it's a commitment of property owners who have 60% or more of their housing units at price at the 60% affordable to 60% of families at area median income. We actually have a lot of properties and units involved in this program already, more than 2,500. And what we're really thinking about is, you know, making this as people have said, split incentive, because if they're not paying for the electricity, the tenant's paying for that, but the landlord has to approve like the improvements or pay for them. We're trying to really make it very simple and hopefully easy by systemizing it and incorporating funding incentives that can cover 90% of those improvements. That's what we have a plan for, and that's what we're going to start on. The new plan will also provide free energy audit and evaluations for improvements for all the apartment buildings, and provide 0% financing to make those improvements to cover whatever incremental costs there might be for that as well too. So we're on the incentive path for this. And we hope to be able to combine that with something that will also create some goals that everyone has to live by, and so that combination is what we're hoping that will make a difference.
We have another question in that same genre. It's what % of people who live in Minneapolis do organic recycling, if you have a number on that? And secondly, do all apartment dwellers have access to organic recycling?
We right now, recycling is only available through city, so that is 1 to 4 unit homes that get the city recycling and composting and garbage services. All apartment buildings and anything larger residential 5 units and up is commercial, and they have their own individual contracts per building. So the reality on what we have is around just that 1 to 4 units for the city. Right now, we have a participation rate citywide. Composting is available citywide to everyone that's in a 1 to 4 unit, and it's included and free of charge as part of the recycling and garbage service. We have about a 55% participation rate on those 1 to 4 units. We'd really like to see that increase. So that's part of the goals that we have within that zero waste component. We also have a goal to work with Hennepin County to be able to provide more, because we're very partnered with them on organic recycling, to be able to figure out a way we can provide that to a lot more apartment buildings. And believe it or not, we don't have a requirement that apartment buildings even provide recycling services. So we're looking at updating those. So again, this sort of like regulatory and incentive thing is in play here, but we don't currently have requirements even on recycling, so it's voluntary on that. Maybe we need to, so that's within the climate equity plan, to look to require recycling in all apartment buildings, and to look at how we potentially can require it for composting in all buildings, and also provide that at a very affordable, reasonable rate, and incentivize that to try to move the needle on recycling and composting.
Then there was another question about in an aging community, how can it be realistic to think that 2 out of 3 trips would be walk, bike, public transportation? It's referring to those of us who are entering our golden years.
Well, I know it's a challenge, but what we want to be able to do is provide an option for folks not to have a car. It may not be available to everyone who is disabled, but I think it's really important for us to look at options for them as well. But one of our things that we're working on, and we have in place, currently want to expand, is access to our transportation mobility hubs and our EV car sharing program. The EV car sharing program has an ultimate goal within Minneapolis and St. Paul to expand from 35 square miles right now to 75 square miles, so that we get a mobility hub with EV car sharing within a 10-minute walk, and also access to transportation, public transportation within a 10-minute walk as well, of 90% of the residents of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So we want to push the idea of making owning a car optional. On the side of mobility, I think we still need to look at metro mobility and expanded services there for folks. But I'm also really intrigued with bringing in automated car services for folks who don't need wheelchair or walker access that metro mobility might bring, but just need some or need access to an easy accessible car, or don't want to walk that 5 to 10 block 10-minute walk. But there's a lot of intriguing things coming out with driverless cars in Phoenix, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh. And just a few months ago, I experienced 3 different trips on a driverless car. Thought it was fantastic. So there might be some ways we can do that in an economical way using some technology on all electric cars. That could be a sort of the interim between having a metro mobility full disability kind of service to owning your own car and having access and always driving your own car. There's I think some good opportunities for those who are aging to use that type of service as well.
Is there a plan to emulate Rochester and do more geothermal for new buildings?
Yes, we're super excited about what they're doing. The Darcy system that they're proposing was developed by a professor at the University of Minnesota here in the Twin Cities, who was on the Minneapolis Community Environmental Advisory Commission just 5 years ago. But yeah, we'd love to be able to do that. This is a chicken and egg situation, because you have to put a lot of money into the infrastructure before you actually have customers. And so who pays for that financing? But I'm excited to really see that push forward as an alternative. And of course, looking at examples in Scandinavia, Europe, the key to decarbonizing cities is putting the city's housing and businesses on a centralized heating and cooling system that then can be decarbonized in a much more broader way, rather than having to do it, furnace by furnace, house by house by house. So a district energy system, I think we could look at. And one thing that I've always been kind of amazed by is that, do you know who owns 25% of the city land? The city of Minneapolis. The city owns all the city-owned streets, all the right-of-ways, all the boulevards, all the alleys. That's 25% of the entire city's geographic land area. So we're using it for all these other things: sewer, water, electric, Why can't we use it for a district energy system that it creates these centralized systems that can be modularly built on? And that's the Darcy system they're actually implementing in Rochester. So yes, I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth. It's the nut to crack is how you finance it and how you get people signed up. It's a sharp right turn from the current infrastructure system we have right now for heating and cooling in Minneapolis.
Okay, I see 3 hands raised, and I'm gonna go from my left to the right, and that's Jane Lansing.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about plastics and food waste. How effective is plastics recycling? I hear a lot of different stories about that. And then food waste, what is the largest source of it between homes and grocery stores and restaurants and things?
The first question about how successful is plastic recycling is, in Minneapolis, we have one of the most successful plastic recycling and most comprehensive plastic recycling in the country and in the world. However, we're only capturing about 50 to 60% of the plastics that are used in the city of Minneapolis. We have a real problem on the commercial side of that. We're really trying to work hard right now, we're going to be changing out. We are moving forward, it'll be in place, and we didn't even have to have a council decision because we have our health department commissioner can make the decision to phase out black plastic, which can't be recycled, for our takeout good to go, we call it takeout container. But black plastic is not able to be recycled. And so we still get a lot of that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of the kind of packaging that can't be recycled. So, and then even on water bottles, because you're not like sitting next to recycling, they're used a lot in parks and this and that. Water bottles have a lower recycling percentage than almost any kind of other food product related recycling, because you're like in your kitchen when you're emptying it out. So water bottles are 40% recycled. So those all go right into the incinerator, down the HERC downtown, and that's what gets burned, and that's the really big environmental issue. The part of the issue on carbon emissions is really not the issue on HERC, because we're using the heat, actually, the excess heat, and that's part of the downtown district energy heat system. We're also capturing heat to generate electricity that's used by Xcel Energy. So carbon emissions, you could argue, are somewhat offset by the heat and electricity generated. What's not offset is the pollution, the toxins that come out, which, whether you say they can be extracted, probably, but who knows, but there's a lot in there. And so the ultimate situation is, you want to be sustainable and healthy community, you got to figure out how to get off plastics. On food generation is that's much more challenging, because food waste can be much more easily reused and recycled on the commercial side, and we really don't have broad numbers on that. And on the home side, we only have sort of audits, and with our audits of like individual, like what's going into the garbage can, and what we're finding is that homes use about 30% of their waste as food waste, and that's a higher percentage actually of the weight of the garbage, but as far as the volume of it, it's about 30%. But yeah, we still haven't fully researched out how to transition some of that out.
Okay, thank you. Myra?
First of all, I wanted to say that there is public compost places like the Wedge, and then also Wood Lake Park has huge dumpsters where you can put your compostables. I don't know if anybody knows that, but I actually don't have it in my home, so that's what I do. And then I'm wondering about the deadline for these programs. How long are they going to, because I'm a little bit like trying to pace myself here, but do they all go at the same time, or when do these end, these rebates?
Oh, the rebates?
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually are quite a long time. They go through 2032.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that there's an annual limit on. So if you do things over time, you can kind of accumulate the tax incentives or rebates. So it doesn't have to all be done at the same time, and it does have some. Luckily, this along was another really good sort of innovation that the Biden administration put in place, was to put this 10-year timeline on it. So otherwise, I've always done a lot of work in solar energy, and we used to call it the solar roller coaster. It's like the incentives were on for 2 years, and then they were off for 2, and then they were on for 2 years, and then they were off for 2. It's like you go up with business and down with business. So yeah, I used to be a owner of a solar energy business, and it was a solar roller coaster all the time on incentives, but this is through 2032.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Ann McLaughlin.
Yes, I was wondering, it's my understanding that the 2040 plan is on hold now, and I'm wondering what impact that'll have on the city's plan.
A little, in a broad sense, it will have an impact, because the reality, the physics of this whole thing is that people, when they live in higher density multifamily buildings, and the majority of your emissions are from heating and cooling, you have a lower per capita emissions. So higher density means lower emissions per capita, which means we can grow our population and our economy without necessarily having to increase our emissions. On the other hand, there's a lot to be said about resiliency, and green space is kind of the natural wonder of our world. And so ability to have access to green space and the ability for green space to mitigate heat island effects and absorb water and defend against storms. So there's a trade-off. The 2040 plan is not going to necessarily affect our overall climate action if we're able to decarbonize our energy systems and motherize our homes. But on a grander scale about how America lives and that kind of thing, it continues to have a big impact. Obviously, the more land, the more people that take up more land, that causes more impact. So that's just my philosophical thought about it. Will it affect our ability to achieve our carbon neutral goals? No, not if we're committed to our other strategies that we have in the plan.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Pamela Parker, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. This is really interesting because it's down and practical where we can really kind of understand it. So I appreciate it. But I've got several things that I've accumulated as I've been listening. One is going back to the issue of the aging community and people in the Minneapolis. Minneapolis is aging as well, and so one of the things that I would encourage us to think more deeply about, though I appreciated a lot of what you were saying about it, but is that, to be able to even use public transit, older people can't carry 5 bags of groceries, and they can't go grocery shopping every day either. Like, it's the grocery hubs are too far away for that, even in the inner city. So I would just encourage a little deeper thinking about what the real practicalities are that we're facing if we're trying to use more public transit, or if we're thinking that the elderly people are that they're going to be not using cars. And then related to that, I think one of the problems in owning a car in Minnesota is, we might be able to get by with an EV if we just live in the metro area, but there's still no stations out in the rural areas. And for instance, I have to drive almost 400 miles to see my mother on the Canadian border. That's a 7-hour trip, and there's I don't think any EV vehicle now that has enough. There might be some, but I'm just wondering what you see has enough miles, to be able to get there in one trip. And if you're going on a 7-hour trip, you don't have time to get there in the same day and have a 2 or 3 hour stopover to charge up your batteries. So I would just like to see what you think about what the future of better batteries are, or whatever we're going to need to use more EV vehicles. And then my last question was about whether or not this is being coordinated at all with the age-friendly community efforts that are going on, that the governor's office and others are very involved in planning for age-friendly communities. So dumping a lot of stuff at once here, I guess.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I'm pretty I think I missed your first question, but I'll talk about the EV.
Carrying groceries and things like that.
Carrying groceries and things. Well, I honestly I haven't thought about it to that level. I'll be honest with you. I know.
And that was a point. I was just making the point for input. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good point. I see what you're saying about that. You kind of like thinking about, at some point you're not necessarily healthy enough to carry your bags 4 blocks and get in the car and take a transit bus. So a point well made. Within the city of Minneapolis, as far as EV cars and transition, I think what's going to be happening is we're going to be seeing a lot more fast charging stations that are being built. The federal government and the state have now combined in major federal funding to provide EV transit corridors along all major interstates. They're going to be providing fast chargers, which are, when they go from like your house and you have like a plug-in, when they go to the level 2, that's not like 2 times faster, it's 4 times faster because it's exponentially faster. Then when you go to the next level of voltage, it's actually 4 times 4, so it's 16 times faster. So what could take 16 hours takes 1 hour to charge. So those are the kind of chargers that are going to be starting putting in place, and they're moving forward on those. So I think there's going to be an opportunity to be able to get a car that has, well, for sure there's now available 300-mile per charge cars, and they'll be able to have fast high-speed charging stations going forward. Matter of fact, our city energy manager recently purchased a electric car. He drove to his wife's parents' house in Rhinelander, Minnesota, or Rhinelander, Wisconsin, and then to his parents in Stevens Point, and back here over the Labor Day weekend was able to do it, locating fast chargers. So I think the infrastructure is coming along. Minneapolis is going to be expanding access to free, actually high-speed charging stations, and it's all of its publicly owned ramps. And we're also looking at key locations to be able to install public charging in areas where there's not a lot of off-street parking, to be able to provide charging for folks who kind of exclusively park on their street or don't have opportunities. So there's actually money to move forward on that program, part of our climate legacy plan. So, and the third point was about, remind me one more time.
Age-friendly community initiative, that, and whether this is being coordinated, so that voice, I think one of the issues has been that there's been some discomfort amongst the senior population for some of these things, and age-friendly communities are planning for the onslaught of aging that we're experiencing now. And so are those efforts, how do those efforts align? And if the two, if this kind of planning and that kind of planning isn't talking to each other, then we're not going to get where we need to go. And so I'm just encouraging that. I'm hoping that there is some communication, but if not, maybe that could be looked into.
Yeah, I need to look into it a little bit more, to be honest with you. But I am on the governor's climate task force, and integrated in with the new climate plan for the state as well too. But I need to be a little more plugged into that. It's a very, very good point. Thank you.
Okay, Annie? Are you there?
Okay, I'm here. I was just gonna comment about organics recycling for larger apartment buildings. If you, I participate in that, and if you Google City of Minneapolis organics recycling, there's a link there for organics drop-off sites, and there's a little thing you read about what things you can compost, and then you sign up for like a site and you get a little code to open the padlock on the compost bins, and it's really great. There's one right across the street from my building, but it also seems super underutilized, and I think if there was a little bit of outreach to landlords or renters, that you might pick up more people participating in that program.
Yep.
And Sean? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Sean G, you have your hand raised.
Yes.
Hi.
Kim, maybe you could give a plug for our meeting next Thursday with Minneapolis Green Teams Coalition, and kind of your view on how to go beyond just individual households doing things to kind of working more on a block scale, neighborhood scale, working with cultural groups and neighborhood groups to try to mobilize more people, like on home weatherization.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Hi, how you doing? Sean's been great with really some really cool ideas, and I want to give him credit and kudos for really pursuing incorporating indoor air quality into our climate equity plan, amongst other good insights and support and feedback he gave as part of our our climate equity plan steering committee. And yeah, we're really, there's a lot of different groups. Sean works with one of them called Green Teams, which coordinates neighborhood organizations to help with climate action. And we're planning to really do a more integrated approach with outreach with neighborhood organizations and community-based organizations, providing tools like toolboxes to talk about home weatherization, incentives, both from the federal levels and state and local levels, and how to be able to get engaged with experts to do home energy audits, which are going to now be provided for businesses and for homes free of charge across the board as part of our plan. Yeah, there's a Green Teams meeting, I think September 14th it is, right, Sean? Help me out with the location with that and timing.
You're muted, Sean. Can you unmute yourself?
So it's at North Regional Library, yeah, like 6 to 8 p.m. up in North Minneapolis. And then I put the link in the chat. It's on the Minneapolis Climate Action website link. So I put it in the chat for people to check out and RSVP to join us, so you can see how your neighborhood group can plug in.
Thank you.
I want to make one other comment. Jan Midbo, you're still on, right? I can only see so many on the screen, but I know that that Hennepin County has some grants that are available. And if you live in a multi-storied building, there are grants available through Hennepin County that you can engage your neighbors in composting. And so I know that Jan did that. She doesn't live in Minneapolis right now, but she did that for the place in which she's living right now. And I've recently been given.
Yes, I'm here, and yes, yes, Hennepin County does have grants for multifamily units, and it takes a little work, but I live in a co-op in Eden Prairie, and we are in the process. We have almost half of the units in our complex are now composting, and through wonderful help from Hennepin County.
Yes. And I'm applying for that grant for Lyndhurst neighborhood, because I'm on the welcoming committee, so I want all of our neighbors to be composting. They give you the composting bins, they give you the bags. So if you're interested in that, you can contact me and I'll give you the contact name. There was Jane.
Luke Hollenkamp, Diane?
I'm sorry?
Luke Hollenkamp on Lyndhurst neighborhood board?
Yes, I do know. He's our vice president. Yes.
Yeah. So Luke works for me in sustainability at the city.
Yes. He's a great guy.
Incredible person. Yeah.
So Jane Lansing.
You guys have like a very, very, you have like the expert in-house right there. So yeah, perfect. Yeah.
I'm going to go back to plastics recycling again, if I can. Of the plastics that we do recycle, do we recycle it in Minneapolis? Do we have a recycling facility? Do we just do separation and ship it to someplace else? When we recycle it, does it become something else? What happens to it? Where does it go? What does it get recycled into? Could you kind of talk through the path of the plastics that are recycled effectively in Minneapolis?
Yeah, so we have a company called Eureka Recycling, which is Twin Cities based. It's based in Minneapolis. It provides recycling to the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It is a nonprofit organization. It is run, co-led by two women who have been running it now for, I think, 20 plus years. So all the recycling that comes in the blue containers goes to a site in Northeast Minneapolis. And from there it is sorted out. And it is sorted out into usable and not recyclable containers on using multiple different technologies. But the one that is able to sort out black uses a laser technology, and So black plastic can't be recycled because it doesn't have an end use. So it doesn't have anywhere to go. No one will take it. So that's why that goes in the garbage. Otherwise, everything else is actually sorted out and recycled in a quite small radius of the city, around 250 miles. I don't remember the exact number, but it is very locally used. 90% of it is locally recycled. For example, the cardboard I know all goes over to the large recycling facility just off of 280 and University in St. Paul. And so we have a very strong commitment to local source recycling on that. So when I've toured the facility over there, and they actually do public tours, which are quite interesting to see.
You know where the plastics go?
I don't know where the plastics go. I can find that out for you. I can make a connection with Eureka Recycling as well to find out, but it varies by color and type of plastic, and so it's bound in sort of crushed big.
Or I could go take a tour.
Yes, it's actually quite very nice. It's a little you gotta put on, it's very loud, and you gotta put on like eye mask and earphones and this and that, but it's pretty cool technology. Actually, they use air to move things, lasers and air. So like the laser hits it, and then if it doesn't if it's one way, it puffs the air one way. If it's supposed to go another, it puffs the air the other way. So it's pretty cool.
Katie?
Eureka Recycling also does tours. And although they're in Northeast Minneapolis, they aren't very far northeast. They're just a couple blocks north of East Hennepin.
Yeah. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Kim.
Katie and I used to work in the same office way back
In the
when.
same office.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
I wanted to just say that Ellen Archibald has a statement here, but I wanted to say that, some of us do feel sort of like the city of Minneapolis is not really concerned with people over 60 or 65. And that's quite concerning in terms of a lot of things that they do in the city. So I think someone else wrote a note here about plowing and how difficult it is to get out if the streets are not plowed, if the sidewalks, are not shoveled. Of course, we went through that, whether or not the city should plow all the streets. But we'd like to just put that in your ear as a bug to be
Sure.
to think about the aging population and keeping those of us who are above 60, 65 in the city. We'd like to stay in the city. So just as a...
Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not too far away myself. So so I agree. Good to keep that in mind in planning and what we're doing.
Oh, we have another question. Susan Hallstrom.
Thank you so much, Kim, for coming, and thank you for all the tremendous work that your office has done. And we are so lucky to have Luke in our Lyndhurst neighborhood, and he has been so generous with his expertise. It's just a godsend. And I've been tracking this climate plan for the last 2 years, working with MN 350. And to all of my fellow leaguers, Kim and his group have done just a Herculean job getting this done and creating a tremendous plan. Hearing you talk about it, it's like totally sounds like the Jetsons. I mean, automated car, but you're thinking about everything. Everything's on the table for decarbonization, and I'm so grateful. So my question to you is, how do we support you and this work in terms of funding? Because you have all the plans, but what needs to be done by individuals who really want to, give this plan what it needs to keep doing the work, which is going to take a while. What do you need from us to show the support?
Well, one, we always appreciate
It should be done in about 10.
I'm sorry, what was that? Well, I mean, we need to, we're starting off with our initial funding support here, which is a ongoing funding of $10 million. And we obviously need support from the council, though I think we have the majority, if not all of the support, and certainly from the mayor's office from that side. I think we also need support from folks talking to the utilities and making sure that they should continue to be have their feet held to the fire on decarbonizing and figuring out ways that we can they can be involved in decarbonization. So I think, with Centerpoint, we're hoping that there's alternatives to just having gas lines built in, but let's have pipelines that run geothermal energy through a closed heating and cooling loop. So really, we're being committed to those organizations and trying to push those particular folks. And I also think the organizing within the neighborhoods are going to be really important, and doing whatever we can. And we want to create some toolkits for reaching out to people to really try to make, for example, in Lyndhurst, the folks to be able to get as many folks doing solar energy and also weatherizing their homes. I know there's many older homes there that probably could use some additional insulation, but really pushing with all these incentives to get everybody house by house, block by block, to be able to do that and get organized behind this. And then taking that individual action to other communities as well, wherever you can sort of socialize this through churches or broader community organizations. So it's not just about the city of Minneapolis. We got to have everybody involved. So we're seeing that sort of creep out within the suburban community, but we need to have it universally out there. So sharing the word about it, I think, is really important. And of course, following through by example with, supporting local food markets, buying locally, growing locally, reducing any kinds of use of pesticides, looking at ways to walk more, drive less, and electrify and use more renewable energy. All those are things that sort of walk the talk as well too. So and be engaged in supporting ways that we can do it with low income folks. But we've got a lot of, that's a lot of complications there, but always being supportive of that as a primary sort of focus of what we're doing, so we don't leave anyone behind.
Karen.
Yes, I just want to make another comment about our aging society. And I'd like to say that not all old people are disabled, but I cannot walk 10 blocks to my bus. My bus used to be a block away, and the city took away that line. The closest bus is about a mile, and I cannot walk that far. I am committed to my car. I can't ride a bike either. So it's either my own car or I'm going to have to pay for Uber or something of that sort. And I'm not eligible for a disability ride. I think there are a lot of us.
It's not I've heard this actually from some of my neighbors. I live in Bryn Mawr, and
So do I.
okay, so
Bryn Mawr bus they took away that went out.
No, the number 9
that went out to Benilde St. Margaret's.
Yeah, Dot Lilja. I don't know.
She's a friend.
She's lives just 2 houses from me, so
okay.
Yeah, so she's bent my hair on this issue too. I don't have a good answer for you. There's a lot of jurisdictions on the transit stuff, and
I just am saying I think it's a mindset. Just because you're old doesn't mean you're disabled.
Right.
But you can't do everything.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Jane, do you have another question? Jane?
I do have another question. Sorry to have so many questions. I just looked at Electrify Everything Minnesota, and under water heaters, do you know why they have only heat pump water heaters and not tankless electric water heaters?
Yeah, the reason is that the energy efficiency of a tankless water heater is much lower than air source water heater. So it uses a heat pump system, which uses a very low amount of electricity. It's like your refrigerator, it uses like 150 watts. Whereas a tankless water heater is like your hair dryer, where it uses what's called induction heating, and that uses thousands of watts when it runs.
Any other questions here? I don't see any other raised hands.
Jane has a question here on chat, Diane.
Jane Papa Giorgio?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Jane, do you want to speak to your question, or shall I read it?
I guess it's not really a question, but I just have a great deal of concern about the amount of money that's being spent on all these street redesign things that, you know, are replacing parking and making driving more difficult, people getting in and out of their, you know, alley, you know, driveways into the street. There have been issues with emergency vehicles in the winter on some of them. And we can only ride a bike, you know, maybe 6 or 7 months, 8 months max during the year. Anyway, it just seems like there would be better use in some of the areas of need that you're talking about than redoing all the streets in Minneapolis the way they are. It just seems like great expense. I mean, there's streets that still are full of potholes or that have been temporarily refilled that are difficult to drive on, but they keep working on the street redesign. I just have a concern about the amount of money. It seems like it could be better spent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, part of that is that there's like new money sort of drives in these new investments as compared to like money coming in from the federal government or others that on maintenance. I know that's part of the factor. Of course, we also have part of the factor because we're trying to encourage a lot more biking, but your point is well made. There is a study that came out, and I'm a huge biker. I've biked to work every day. I have 3 bikes. But the practical, I'll just throw this out there to support your opinion, Jane, that to be honest about it, the reality is that the amount of carbon savings related to biking based on the amount of expense that's put into creating bike lanes has a very low benefit to cost ratio relative to other measures that reduce carbon more economically efficiently than that. And that's those are studies that are done have been done in the United States as well as Europe. So I'm just saying that your point and sort of your observations on a cost benefit ratio have been looked at. But yeah, that's been sort of like one of the solutions we know and has been funded that we know kind of can move us a little bit anyway in the right direction. We have to create that space, but on the other hand, is it an economically compared to other options the best way to go? That is called into question.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like there could be designated streets that have bike lanes and not so many. I mean, I'll go to the grocery store. I won't see a single person biking on the bike lane. You know, when I'm out in my car, I see very few bikers in the bike lanes. It just seems they're not even very fully used is all. And that's what makes me wonder, is it worth it? Is it worth this expense? So just a comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, personally, I you know, as someone who lived at 13th and Hennepin and I bike down Hennepin Avenue, I like those bike lanes. Does it need to be down Hennepin or could it be down, you know, Harmon, which is right, you know, parallel, just like they did on Bryant. You know, there's Bryant has a bike lane, and Lorraine Park was really involved in getting a bridge over the Lindale to curve into that. So does Hennepin need to have a bike lane on it? I wasn't involved in that decision. I'm a biker, so I sort of support it in general, but I know what people are saying that at some point, you know, let's focus on more rideable, easier streets where we can implement this without the sort of impact on many other things, trees, parking, business, flow, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Bryant Avenue is a very sore subject in this neighborhood, so
Okay.
we don't talk about Bryant Avenue. We shouldn't talk about Bryant Avenue on this call anyway, because I think that's more to do with city planners and our city council. So that's not your,
Okay.
I don't think that's in your court. So, but anyway,
All
anybody
right.
else?
Well, I think we got time for like one more question, but
Katie, is that you? That's
no, it's Myra. Looks like she's got her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Muted.
So we'll.
Thought I had unmuted myself. Sorry.
Oh.
I was just going to say bike lanes serve a really good purpose, and that's traffic calming. Aside from the connectivity that they add to the city. I'd have been glad to have bike lanes when I was biking to work.
Right. I know. I remember you bike to work all the time. Yeah, it's the Hennepin Avenue bike lane stuff that's down in downtown. That's is still being built, but has been built, and a big section of it is really nice. I just rode it the entire way across the Hennepin Avenue Bridge and straight down Hennepin Avenue to Parade Stadium and out here to Bryn Mawr. And it was very nice and very durable, and there was quite a few bikes on it. So yeah, again, there's a lot of different opinions on how this is depending on your own situation, and but I'm just sort of throwing things out there as well too. Yeah, thanks, Kitty.
Okay, so we have four more minutes, I believe. So Myra, you want to quickly unmute yourself, please?
Oh, unmute. Well, I don't know. I'm just saying this related to another situation I had and something very different. But I think that if we have to be somewhat friendly to the older people as well, I was in another situation where a lot of seniors left, and they left with their money, and the organization is struggling a bit because of that. So I don't know, maybe the seniors living in Minneapolis have a few more funds, and if they all go to the suburbs, then the tax base lessens. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Just not wanting to be too controversial, but that's my piece.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, Lisa Mills, you want to take it over now? You're muted.
Okay, I guess we are out of time, aren't we?
Pretty much.
I guess we'll want to say thank you very much to our distinguished guest, Mr. Kim Havey, Director of Sustainability for the City of Minneapolis and member of the White House. Oh, no, I'm not going to say it right. What is it, Kim?
The White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council.
There you go. Very important. And to everyone who
Yeah,
participated.
the one thing I will say that, I want to just point out that one of the things our what's called WEJAC, the White House Environmental Justice Council, did as part of this new incentive program is we actually came up with the Justice 40 initiative. We developed a new executive order by the president that has been issued. They got some press about the need to focus on environmental justice. And we actually created a mapping tool called the Environmental Justice Screening Tool that's put in place based on a series of indicators, what communities are considered environmental justice communities, where 40% of federal funds need to be invested in. So it's been on it for 3.5 years. It's been a really important and integral part that I'm really proud that the president and his team have allowed us to really incorporate a lot of stuff into especially the Inflation Reduction Act. So
that's all good. I just wanted to say also thank you to all the members, and a lot of good questions, a lot of questions and discussion, which I appreciate. And that wraps up our Civic Buzz for today. Please, as I said at the beginning, remember to tell your friends and colleagues and neighbors to come to our Civic Buzz and help our democracy function with better informed participating citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was great.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
It's you and me.